The biggest red flag in the last 3 to 4 years, exposing what we're just beginning to introduce to maybe your audience, is the trust the science dogma that was broadcast the last 3, 4 years. That's an oxymoron, because the opposite is true in true science. True science is challenge the science. Keep challenging everything that we think we've discovered, because that's the only way we think we're going to get to a better truth or a better understanding.
From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hilda Labrada Gore.
Hey, Hilda here. Pills, prescriptions, surgeries, radiation, chemo. Have you ever wondered if modern medicine is truly looking out for your best interests? Is it about profit or your health? Maybe it's time to take the red pill to find out. This is episode 536, and our guests today are John Gusty and Dr. Jeremy Ayres. They are co-authors of the book, The Red Pill Revolution. And today, they pull back the curtain. They are working to empower people to take their health into their own hands and to become aware of the deception in the medical industrial complex and its ties to pharma and food. These two men mince no words, and literally, they break down the etymology of words like diagnosis and COVID/convid. Basically, they are doing the best they can to shed light on the origins of modern medicine and today's practices, explaining why the science is never settled and why you need to get out of the matrix. Before we get into the conversation, I want to invite you to find out about a wonderful resource of ours. It's called Nourishing Our Children. Are you a parent, a grandparent, or an adult interested in children's health? Nourishing Our Children is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation. It launched in 2005 with a focus on timeless principles for supporting learning, behavior, and health through optimal nutrition. Nourishing Our Children has an active closed group on Facebook that offers support for how to nourish and not merely feed your children. If you join, you'll also have complimentary access to the group focused on adults for one donation of only $5 for the calendar year. The moderators ensure that no question goes unanswered. So go to nourishingourchildren.org/groups. Again, that is nourishingourchildren.org/groups to learn how to join. And here is a testimonial. I am a first-time mom of a soon-to-be 9-month-old and a member of the Nourishing Our Children's private Facebook group. I began with the Nourishing Traditions book of baby and child care, but I felt I needed encouragement and support implementing some of the recommended food practices. So, joining this group became instrumental in helping me navigate the barriers that I had to giving my baby his first nourishing foods. I've had so many questions and have been so grateful for the clarifications and answers. My questions are always answered, and I'd say rather promptly as well. Thank you, Nourishing Our Children. Catherine's testimonial is helpful. If you want to learn more, go to nourishingourchildren.org/groups and join now. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Jeremy and John. We're glad to have you.
Thanks for having us, Hilda.
Yeah, Hilda, thank you very much. Looking forward to this conversation.
I think it's important because we implicitly trust the mainstream medical conventional system in a way that we don't trust other professionals in our lives. John, can you shed some light on that truth?
You may have read in my bio or whatever, and we've had some conversations offline, but I come from a lifetime of the entertainment industry, specifically the music industry. And so I've kind of seen that world from every angle, behind the scenes, up on stage, and everything in between. So I'm very, very, very well acquainted with the art of marketing and manipulation and growing audiences, and in some cases even flat out deceit. If you're trying to, if the marketing program has purpose. And my wife now of over 20 years, when we first got together, she was originally diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and was walking with a cane. And my wife has got many, many wonderful attributes about her personality, but she's not the best question asker. And so I started going to her medical appointments with her. And keep in mind, I had no previous medical industrial complex experience. I've been very healthy my whole life, so I never was in hospitals or doctor's offices. So this was really kind of a new world to me, and I treated it like any other world that I, whether I was talking to an accountant or a lawyer or an industry professional, I just treated them the same way. It took a matter of moments to realize, oh my gosh, like they're offended if you ask questions. They're offended if you give them your own opinion on things. And there was just this assumed baked in trust with that profession that I have never seen before. And I didn't quite understand it. So I just kept asking questions, and I guess I just kept irritating and making people upset. But this is my wife we're talking about, and we're not going to put something in her or on her or expose her to anything unless we know exactly what the objective is, what the stuff is, what are we doing. I found all too quickly that most of those medical professionals did not have those answers, at least adequate enough answers when we're talking about life and death situations. And so I just proceeded as I normally would. And to this day, it just baffles me. I mean, can any of us, if we're being perfectly honest, look up leading causes of death or look up leading health, situations and look at like whatever the top 10 is. And it's always the same stuff. It's always heart and respiratory, diabetes, sugar-related things, weight issues. Let me put it this way. Can they cite any victories? Can they cite any breakthroughs, any advancements? Is anyone less fat? Is anyone more healthy? Can they cite any accomplishments whatsoever? And again, if you go look up leading cause of death, leading cause of illnesses, any of those top 10 lists, if they have made any advancements, those lists don't reflect it.
No, you're right. It's been the same offenders for decades, even though there's a war against cancer and there's a search for the cure or whatever they have out there. It's still the same old thing. Jeremy, do you find that this is true, that I guess I would say the average person is very willing to cede to the will of their medical practitioner in a way that they're not in other areas of their lives?
Oh, absolutely. And I think although you have a probably broad audience that's used to this kind of conversation, there may be people listening and already starting to think they've got some quacks or tinfoil hat or anti-this or anti-this on your show. And I think it's really important that people know that John and I've been doing this for over 30 years and researching for over 30 years and incredibly successful at getting people well. We didn't wake up one day and just go, I'm going to pick every controversial subject known to man because it's going to improve my social status, my professional status, or my income, because the opposite is actually true. We were raised by good, humble parents that my mother particularly brought me up to hate bullies and liars. And I just didn't realize at the time that basic education was going to lead me to find that the so-called authorities and so-called science and so-called leaders of our time are usually the biggest bullies and biggest liars of all. And it was a long journey into that. I set off quite young from a family business. I came out of a family building business to follow osteopathy and then naturopathy. And I've spent the last 30 years researching and helping people. And the more I researched, the further and further it pushed me away from conventional medicine. And the more you go that way, the more isolated you become even from your own profession. Because only when you start to actually be willing, and I think that's the key, willing to entertain the thought that maybe medicine wasn't set up to actually help you. Maybe medicine is a business. Now, when you first hear that, you go, but I've got a lovely doctor, or my daughter's a nurse, and yes, we've found that many, many wonderful people have gone into medicine. But most of those that we respect have found that when they try to do their job properly, they're very, very severely reprimanded or lose their license. I mean, Weston Price, all right, he was a dentist, but he at least had the foresight to go, why are people getting so sick? And as you, of course, you well know, he went around the world examining people's teeth, and he started to see diet, fundamentally diet, and also where they lived, exposure to the sun or lack of, highly affected their health and their longevity and their outcomes. To this day, if you speak to an enterologist or somebody to do with the digestive system and suggest that diet might have a role, to this day, they'll laugh at you. My patients all the time are telling me that their specialist said, your diet has nothing to do with it. Now, when we're at 2025 and the people that we invest an enormous amount of faith in don't realize diet has any effect whatsoever, you really have to stop and ask yourself why.
Yes, and I wonder why, John, let's see if you can feel this question. I wonder why more medical professionals don't ask that very question. They see patient after patient after patient, and often on a regular basis because they have to tweak the meds and it's not, they're not seeing the progress and the improvement that they want. Why don't they ever stop in their tracks and say, something's not working here and we're just managing an illness, we're not reaching a cure?
There's a certain aspect or quality to medical professionals. And the only thing that I've ever really been able to equate it to is it seems to be the same sort of dynamic when people go into police work. Like there's this baked in elevated status, perhaps. I mean, if that's a way to put it, it's like when you see somebody, I'm a policeman, it's like, ooh, you're a policeman, or I'm a doctor. Ooh, you're a doctor. Lawyers kind of had that for a little bit, but I think the lawyering profession has not done itself any favors over the years. But anyways, these people, well-meaning people, I like Jeremy said, I think the majority of the people that go into the medical profession, they do go into it with the best of intentions. It's just like public school teachers. Most public school teachers go into that profession with the best of intentions. They want to teach, they want to help kids, and then they get in it and they realize, oh my gosh, I'm not allowed to teach. I'm not allowed to discipline. I'm not allowed to do anything except follow the state-driven template that I'm given. And I think medical professionals are kind of suffering from the same thing, is they're taught what they're taught. And education, that term education, simply just means you are repeating what you've been told.
Yes, I want to interject with a story here because one of my daughters had issues with her appendix. And I remember we went in to get her seen and they were like, okay, we have to do surgery. We have to do the appendix surgery, remove it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, wait, because I had just read something about it. And I was like, I heard that in Europe, they're doing X, Y, and Z. And they were very hesitant, to say the least, about doing anything outside of the standard of care. Because if they didn't honor that, maybe their own license or reputation would be at risk, or I don't know, they were just so resistant. And in the end, we actually went forward with whatever they were recommending because it seemed like it was so, jeopardy. It was jeopardy for us too, and for my own daughter's health and life. So they do frame it in these black and white terms. It's like, you've got to follow the rules.
You hit on something that was quite, I see it all the time, is the medical professionals are much more concerned with losing their status than they are with your health and wellness. And they will protect their status and their, the right to practice. I mean, again, think of any other profession where you would prioritize things that way. I mean, the guy mowing your lawn wants to do the best job he can so that you have him back to mow his lawn. If you ask him to, trim some tree or whatever, and he go, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my lawn mowing license if I do that, be like, get out of here. I'll just go get somebody else to mow my lawn. The objective should be health and wellness of the patients, and it's just not.
Let me jump in there, John, because it's a really important point. First of all, so-called modern medicine, although it's the youngest medicine on the planet, of course, there's some merits. If you're in a car accident, you're bleeding, broken bones, as long as you get in front of a decent trauma team, they're the people that you need to see. But they base their whole foundation on quote-unquote evidence-based medicine. And, after 30 years, and there's many scientists that we respect that would agree with what I'm saying, but when you look at the quote-unquote science, turns out there's almost no science going on. And so the evidence-based medicine is usually based on non-science, or what I call BS, bad science. And from that, they draw their confidence to make such decisions. Part two of that is the system that's been set up around them, as you rightly sort of began to share, Hilda, is that they have to come up with a diagnosis. And once you come up with a diagnosis and you're labeled in the system, they only have certain options and tests and procedures that they can do, or they're in trouble. And because particularly America is a sue culture, they're terrified for their own, safety and career. Now, diagnosis is made up of three words: diagnosis. Di means two, ag means not, and gnosis means to know. So it literally means two people not knowing what the hell's going on. Now, that's very advantageous when you're in a position of apparent knowledge versus very little knowledge. So the patient hasn't very much knowledge at all. They're in fear. They're often suffering. And most people, in my experience, having helped tens of thousands of people, are terrified of doctors. They're like John's wife. They're terrified to ask a question, look stupid, or get told of what have you. And so it's very, very important that people understand that the system they're going into to ask advice is very, very skewed one way. They're not allowed to ask, what have you been eating? They're not allowed to suggest anything other than what's in front of them. And at the end of the day, when you start to dig deeper and deeper and realize there's almost no science. I'll give you a very quick example, just as an example. Iodine. I'm sure Weston Price, I'm sure Sally is familiar with iodine. I hope yourself, Lugol's iodine. Lugol's iodine was a universal medicine for 150 years. The old GPs or old doctors even had a little poem to remember it. It was carried in every doctor's bag. Back in the 60s, Wolf and Krieg did a quote-unquote study in which they said it blew up the thyroids of rats. The problem is they didn't test the thyroids of the rats, which it didn't. But from that day forward, it was taught in every medical school to every doctor and certainly endocrinologist that iodine, a minute amount to which used to be given, was now poison. So it went from universal medicine to universal poison. To this day, I have God knows how many hundreds and thousands of people that have healed serious conditions, particularly thyroid, using levels of iodine that an endocrinologist would pass out just at the thought, all based on bad science. There's one example.
Yeah, I'd like to make just a quick comment on that word science, because especially in the last 4 or 5 years, that word, we live in a time where words and symbols are very, very powerful. Individually, you want to recognize that or not, words are very, very powerful. And a lot of words that we use are misused deliberately. And science is one of those words. Science is a discipline. Science is no different than honesty or fidelity. It's a discipline. It is not a government institution. It is not a building with an address. It is not a group of people. It is a discipline. I'm holding up a ballpoint pen right now. I could scientifically prove to you that this is a ballpoint pen. Okay? There is no, and I would use the scientific method and scientific discipline to prove that. There is no need for a third-party organization or government to come in and declare this a ballpoint pen. And that's what we've been experiencing our entire lives, but certainly at an elevated pace the last 4 or 5 years is science, 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 as if science is this government entity that knows more than you do. And it's not. It's simply a discipline. And those that use science and the discipline of science know how to use it. And if you listen to someone using a scientific discipline, you can feel the truth resonate. You see somebody on TV with a fancy name and letters after their name, claiming to be science, Anthony Fauci maybe. I don't know. There's an old saying. I think it was Margaret Thatcher that said, "If you're a lady, you don't need to claim that you are one." I think somewhere along.
The biggest red flag in the last 3 to 4 years, exposing what we're just beginning to introduce to maybe your audience, is the trust the science dogma that was broadcast the last 3-4 years. That's an oxymoron, because the opposite is true in true science. True science is challenge the science. Keep challenging everything that we think we've discovered, because that's the only way we think we're going to get to a better truth or a better understanding.
I see. Science is not something static, as if it were a seal of approval. This is science and that isn't science. You're saying science is an approach of discipline. And all of us should be able to be citizen scientists. We should be able to examine something and determine for ourselves. It doesn't matter how many letters you have after your name.
Not at all. Anyone using the scientific discipline is a scientist by definition.
Coming up, Jeremy shares the shocking truth about how few medical professionals are actually reading the latest studies. And he discusses the implications of their busyness and their lack of attention to real science.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Optimal Carnivore. Organ meats are some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. But the guys over at Optimal Carnivore know that they're not always easy to source well or to make tasty. This is why Optimal Carnivore has started sourcing 100% grass-fed organ meats from New Zealand, freeze-drying the organs and encapsulating them into convenient bovine gelatin capsules. And their products are 100% grass-fed and grass-finished and free of hormones, pesticides, antibiotics, and GMOs. Our ancestors would have eaten the whole animal, nose to tail. So Optimal Carnivore has created a unique blend of 9 different organs in their grass-fed organ complex. It is a powerful combination that includes beef liver, brain, thymus, heart, kidney, spleen, pancreas, lung, and gallbladder. It is a real nose-to-tail solution, and each organ contains its own unique benefits and nutritional profile. And it provides a large range of nutrients that supports all of the major organs and glands. So take the guesswork and hassle out of eating organ meat. These products are perfect for people who are traveling or still trying to develop an appreciation for organ meats, let's say. So you also need to know that Optimal Carnivore plants 1 tree for every product sold, which helps the environment. So they've got their grass-fed organ complex that I already mentioned, a grass-fed bone marrow, and a grass-fed liver product, among others. Go to amazon.com/optimalcarnivore to place your order today and use the code WESTON10 to save 10% on all products. Again, that's amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and use the code WESTON10 to save 10% on your order. And Earth Runners, many of us want to live a more simple, nature-based lifestyle and including those practices into our lives. But we often overlook how our shoes affect the way we interact with the earth. Our ancestors were virtually always grounded. They lived in constant connection with the earth because they were barefoot or wearing leather-soled moccasins or sandals. When our feet are connected to the earth in this way, which is a practice called earthing or grounding, it allows the body to take in electrons, which help to restore our natural electric state and for everything in the body to run more smoothly. However, these days, most of us wear shoes with rubber soles that insulate us from the earth, so we don't get our energetic benefit anymore from grounding. Earth Runner's sandals are designed to change all of that. They feature a copper earthing plug on the bottom and conductive laces to keep us grounded to the earth. Earth Runners is an ancestral-inspired sandal company, which has created minimalist earthing sandals to support a more barefoot experience, both physically and electrically. Earth Runners has taken the millennia-old footwear design known as the huarache, which is a simple sole with a wrapping lace, one of the oldest designs in history, and they've upgraded it with Vibram soles and earthing technology to give you the most minimalist, natural, and grounded shoe experience you've ever had. So restore your natural connection with the planet via earthing to enjoy the myriad of benefits while taking in the elements, the same as our ancestors used to do. Earth Runners offers that minimalist sole for healthy full range of foot movement too, which improves everything upstream. Earth Runners aspires to restore our relationship with nature and to help us rediscover our ancestral roots via minimalist earthing sandals, rewild, and reconnect with Earth Runners. You can find them at earthrunners.com and use the code WISE2025 for 10% off at checkout. Again, that's earthrunners.com and use the code WISE2025 at checkout for 10% off. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Tradition.
But it's worse than that. It's been deliberately made into a religion, hence the don't question the science. And when you do question the science, you actually find 95%, and this is other scientists that we respect, who we would describe as true scientists, 95% isn't science. It's bad science. Most patients going to a doctor, hence the evidence-based medicine, probably assume they read current studies. No one's reading the study. Only very weird people read studies. At best, some of your doctors, and not many, will read the headline and the conclusion and nothing in the middle. And there was actually a study done where in the middle of the study, they put, call this number and you get a free box of champagne. And no one called it to prove that no one reads the studies. And so there is an enormous amount of assumptions. There is an enormous amount of, I would say, professional ignorance going on in medicine. And at the end of the day, if you go and look financially, what is the biggest cause of bankruptcies in America? 65% of all bankruptcies is medical bills. It's a business model. And those good people trying to heal, I have found, are trapped within it, not helping usually.
So, Jeremy, how can we bust out of that then? If this is the model and this is the almost matrix that we've grown accustomed to, how can we, people who want to be healthier, who do we turn to? What do we do? How do we bust out of this so we don't just trust the science, which is a, kind of a fake matrix?
It's an excellent question. Well, we start with asking questions and we start with planting seeds. One of the seeds I like to plant in people's brains is this. If a medicine makes a healthy man or woman sick, it can't make a sick man or woman healthy. Now, of course, there are extremes from maybe paracetamol or an aspirin up to chemo. And I don't believe the word therapy should be put after chemo. I think it is absolutely offends Hippocrates, first do no harm. It's a poison. You will never convince me that that's a therapy. But most quote unquote medications people are consuming, if you gave them to a healthy man or woman, it would cause them side effects. Well, drop the word side, it would cause effects. Why? Because you can't be deficient in a pharmaceutical drug. All pharmaceutical drugs are toxic to the body. The body has to do something with it. So I like to start planting seeds there before we even get onto, which Weston Price I'm sure will agree, most people aren't eating even food. They're eating feed and artificial at it.
Oh my gosh, such a good point. I've never heard it put that way. I've thought of pseudo food, but considering it feed, almost like a animal feed, that's exactly what's...
My hope is through conversations like these, more people can get to the point where I got to years ago. When you walk into any grocery store, I don't care what the grocery store is, whether it's Jeff Bezos, Amazon, Whole Foods, all the way down to your local grocery. If you don't walk into a grocery store and if you are not offended by, the feed porn, just the sugar and the carbs and the inks and dyes and just all the garbage that is on the shelves, if you're not offended by that, then you need to keep learning and you need to keep listening because most of the stuff on grocery store shelves is also toxic.
Yeah, maybe one of the first questions we need to ask is not of our medical professional, it's of ourselves. What am I putting into my body and is it serving me well?
Jeremy says this quite often, and I think it's a great thing. The human beings are the only species on Earth that doesn't instinctively know what to eat.
Well, that's been and it's true. It's been very, very engineered that way. And, supermarkets, you should drop the word super. I'm sure that word was invented much the same as Bill Gates chose the word virus, which he could have chose germ or any other. I think he put that into the subconscious mind that computer viruses, of course, by default are harmful or even exist for that matter. But I certainly think supermarkets was put in there to make it think that it was super. The supermarket is probably the next most dangerous place to walk into, the first one being a hospital.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, you guys are blowing my mind. I love the way you're breaking down some of these words and hopefully causing all of us to think. I know you're making me think. And that leads me to something you said earlier, Jeremy, the way you said that modern medicine is the youngest medicine on the planet. Can you explain that a little bit?
Absolutely. And it's really important for how we started this, because if you don't know history, it has a habit of repeating itself, and usually to mankind's detriment. Modern medicine is just over 100 years old, and it came in with the Flexner report, which was basically sponsored by the Rockefeller Foundation, because they wanted to use oil to not just run gasoline and engines, what have you, but they wanted to use petroleum based and turn it into drugs. Most of your drugs, if not all, are petroleum based.
That's huge, though, Jeremy. Let that sink in. If people haven't heard that, most, if not all, pharmaceutical drugs are petroleum based. So back to that business model. The Rockefellers were peddling oil. They just opened up a whole other market by opening up. If the name Rockefeller isn't familiar to you, I would highly suggest there is a great documentary by James Corbett called Rockefeller Medicine. And like Jeremy said, it's only a little more than 100 years old. A little more than 100 years ago, we were all humans worldwide were practicing ancestral, homeopathic, natural ways of taking care of themselves. And then industry came in by the way of the Rockefellers, and it turned into this petroleum peddling monstrosity.
More nefarious than that. It was deliberately set up, a Flexner report funded by the Carnegie, which is Rockefeller money, to basically go, because osteopathy, chiropractics, homeopathy, herbalism, naturopathy were more successful and more used than what were then the chemist or the pharmacist or the doctors of the time. And it was designed to go out and destroy those industries. So what they did was they set a report which was not accurate, and that everybody should have a standardized education. And the way to get a standardized education bankrupted most of those universities and colleges from the get-go. The only way you could survive was get a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, and you'd only get a grant if you had someone from the Rockefeller Foundation or Carnegie on your board. And so bit by bit, the rotten apple got in, and everything that used to be brilliant was watered down. Most chiropractics, osteopathy, herbalism is a watered down poor cousin of what it was. And so it set up a business model that modern medicine became legally by governments and worldwide the primary care. And it's a business model. Let me just finish very quickly, Hilda. Ask yourself this simple question. When you go back to basic journalism of follow the money, pharmaceuticals are bigger business than any other business on the planet, by far. And so what do you need if you're in that business? You need sick people. How do you make people sick? You educate them stupid. And they've done a good job over the last 100 years. And Weston Price has done a fantastic job of trying to rectify that.
Let's not just gloss over the fact that, you have to go to their universities, which Rockefeller Foundation has slowly but surely taken over all university boards. So you got to go to their universities to get their certification to work in their medical facilities and have their title of, like Jeremy keeps saying, it's a business model. Okay. And if you go against that business model, you're going against a huge monolith monstrosity of it's more powerful than governments. I mean, government, it's all intertwined. It's this big, massive economic engine that if everyone was well, that engine wouldn't run very well. So they have to keep people sick. And I
just want to jump on that as a final point. If we had a healthy environment, when someone like me comes along, the doctors or the governments with my success rate, they should go, that's interesting. How did you achieve that? But they don't, as you well know. I've been cancelled from every platform. My ability to transact has been cancelled over and over again. Why? Not because I've not been successful. It's because I have been successful. And if we had an environment, which I think Maha will be and has the potential to be, they would be not standing up in Congress or Parliament saying how many people they helped this year, they would be standing up saying how few people they needed to treat this year. Because the definition of a true doctor, and doctor means teacher, is you should be getting them off the medication and not needing to pay you.
Well, what I love is you're actually living up to the moniker of doctor, both of you, because you are teaching, you are educating, and you're inviting questions. You're not saying these are the only answers. You're planting seeds for people to take ownership of their own health. And John, I was going to say, you with your background in the entertainment industry understand also the power of marketing, because not only did the Rockefellers pour all this money into this training and into this economic engine, as you were saying, but they also maligned the former medicine that people turned to. They started kind of bad-mouthing it, for lack of a better word, and calling it quackery.
Absolutely. Well, and look at how well, now I will compliment them. They are expert marketers, because look at what they did. They got human beings. I bet you 95%, if not more, of the people listening to this, well, this audience is probably a little more learned than most, but the vast majority of people, look at what people like when you say the term healthcare. Look at what people think of. They think of healthcare as being something that they get through their employer. They get healthcare means to most people access to government stuff, government services, where it's like, is there any more precious responsibility that every one of us has than our own health? Why would we possibly, again, the power of marketing, why would we possibly offload that precious responsibility to a third party and say, here, my health care is now your responsibility?
It's also why the words are important, because it was called dis-ease for a reason. A doctor originally does mean teacher. And if you're in any state of dis-ease, the teacher is meant to show you where you've gone off track, gone wrong, offended nature. And when John said, which I say frequently, we're the only animal that doesn't know what to eat, we have been educated stupid. We've also been educated to be indoors in front of electrics and electrical frequencies, which completely disrupt, along with the artificial light, how your hormones are regulated and released in your body. This is why if anybody comes on and ever joins our membership and our 90-day challenge, every vlog I do is outside. I'm famous for saying, get your outside. Even if it's just standing on a balcony in a high-rise, horrific building, that you need the light. Weston Price would have known this. He wouldn't have thought of these problems at this time. If you don't get natural light, your chances of thriving, let alone healing, are much reduced in spite of what you eat.
Which is why hospitals are so dangerous. You're under artificial light. You're breathing crappy air. Even the windows have UV coating on it, which will kill all that precious sunlight that could have gotten in. You're being fed gross water, fluorinated water, gross food.
And look at the nurses and doctors. They look so unhealthy to me. And I know that they struggle with these things. So I appreciate the people who go into the profession wanting to help people. And yet somehow the industry and the education kind of reshapes them into these people that follow the rules and they can no longer bust out. But I love your invitation for us to do this, to bust out.
I don't mean to be unkind, but it does shape them into drug dealers. And I've been told by learned people within the profession, there's a lot of silent quitting because they know they can't become the doctors and nurses they wanted. So they do silent quitting. They leave and go and do something else. I've had hundreds and hundreds of nurses talk to me. And since COVID, and I think it's accurate to call it that, we've had more and more doctors who woke up and saw what was going on reach out to us. And they want to be doctors and they want to be nurses. But this is why Maha and, we've launched a mission to make 1 million people well again ourselves. The energy has to be, that's interesting. How did you do? And we need to start. That's what John and I are about. Get the conversation in the public. Get it out there for the benefit of all, not your ego or your salary.
I love that. And so tell us a little bit more about this approach, how you are helping to empower people to break out of the matrix. We said asking questions is a good start and realizing and seeing things for how they are. But what else? Get outside, you said. What else can we do to really step out and take ownership?
I've actually got, this is going to sound like a shameless plug, and it really isn't because we don't want any money and we don't even want your email address. But if you go to naturallybetterforyou.com, there is what I'm holding up is the anti-dependency guide. And this is a guide that we put together, and it is chock full of aspects of life that most of us have the ability to adjust and be more in control of: our health, ourself, our possessions, and our property. And again, if you go to naturallybetterforyou.com, scroll down, there's some downloads, free downloads there. Get that anti-dependency guide because it cover the gamut. We talk about water, light, EMF, grounding, healthcare, sourcing, physical goods versus digital, media, commercial versus private, which is a big one. The guide ends on probably my favorite topic of all, which is consent. And the number of things that we are subjected to in mass that don't have our consent is breathtaking once you have eyes to see it.
What occurs to me is when you're dependent, it's kind of comfortable. Let's just say, if I work at my computer all day and I feel like I'm having trouble with my knee, and then I go see a doctor and they give me a shot of something, and it's like, oh, I can just go somewhere and they give me something and I come back and I don't have to change too much. To become independent sounds a little bit hard. Jeremy, can you speak to that?
Yes, you have the right to remain stupid, and I'll fight for my dying breath that you have that. And also, unlike John, I am absolutely happy to be commercial and plugged to join our membership. And I'll tell you why. In my experience, no one tends to do things unless they part money. And we've done free stuff forever and we'll continue to do free stuff. But you need to at some point go, you know what? I'm going to, not that it's a lot of money, it's like $99 for 3 months and then, ongoing. And it's the best content I've ever produced. But we actually wrote a book, The Red Pill Food Revolution. Our first one was The Red Pill Revolution, about becoming uncomfortable because we've been made deliberately comfortable. The Red Pill Food Revolution book is, I think, an expansion of what Weston Price wrote. He wasn't a great writer, but his information was great. We've expanded on what you're designed to eat and how you're designed, when you're designed to eat. Dr. Jack Kruse would argue, the only way to define food is if light has been involved in the process of it, from plants to animals eating plants. And so anything that hasn't had light touch it is not food by definition. Okay. So in answer to your question, we really have to go back to go forward. We have to look at our ancestors. We have to look how we're actually designed to live before the Industrial Revolution and electricity. Our bodies cannot function and have not evolved enough to be in an electrical field 24/7. It is dehydrating. It is lowering your voltage. The artificial light, which also flickers, is misfiring your whole hormonal system. You just cannot. And my God, if you start buying these virtual reality things that you put on your damn head, you better start getting some insurance because you're gonna need it, right? But the bottom line is this, Hilda, and I know you know it. I know Sally knows it. We have to go back to how our ancestors lived and embrace technology in a way that actually enhances our life, not ruins it. If you look at India, I'll just finish it. But if you look at India and China, mostly they're being sort of bumbling along, relatively ill. But it's only when the Wi-Fi and smartphones came in and they became technological centers did it shoot up in almost a vertical. Did they start getting autoimmunes and bigger cancers and so on and so forth? This electrical life and artificial light is a huge disruptor to health.
Absolutely. And of course, we've done many podcasts on this subject. I think I interviewed some folks, obviously Matt Maruka from Raw Optics, but also Dewey Lehman, who talked about how we are light eaters, a lot of things along this line. Thaddeus Owen, who's also a primal hacker. So I think it's really important. You're right. Dr. Price talked about food in his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. He didn't talk about light because it was so obvious. It was a part of everyone's life. All the people, the indigenous people, were exposed to the natural sunlight. They don't have the issues we're facing today. So I appreciate your challenge that something in our environment has to shift as well. And it's not just the food. It has other things. There are other factors involved in our well-being. Do you have anything to add to that, John, before we start to wrap up?
I'm always good for an analogy or two. I'll use the analogy of a house cat. Look at how many house cats, if you look at the bottom of a cat's paw, those little pads, those aren't decorative. Those are functional, right? How many house cats do you think have never touched the ground? Because they never go outside, right? Most house cats never go outside. So they've never touched the ground. They've never laid in actual sunlight because the sun coming in through the windows have UV coating on it. So they're not getting natural sunlight. They're not drinking natural living water because they're probably drinking tap water or worse, bottled water. So that they're not getting natural living water. So they're not touching the ground. They're not exposed to sunlight. They're not drinking natural water. Their food is probably grain based. Most pet food is grain based, and no mammal out there, a natural cat in the wild is not going to walk up to grain and start nibbling on it. They need actual food. They need meat. And so how many of us live like house cats where we never touch the ground? We're never exposed to light. We're surrounded by radiation. Everything that has electrical current running through it radiates. I think people think radiation is this thing that only comes out of nuclear power plants. No, anything that has an electrical current running through it radiates. And every bit of radiation has some effect on physical matter. It's not all catastrophic, but it all is affecting our bodies on a cellular level in some way. So don't be a house cat. Get outside, drink real water, bathe in real sunlight, eat real food, breathe real air. It all goes back to that ancestral stuff. That's why ancestrally, and it's not just in biblical text, but you can look in lots of older texts, people lived a lot longer than they're living now. I mean, now we're lucky if you hit 80, 90 years old. This might sound crazy to people, but there are many, many, many ancient texts where people were living hundreds of years at a time.
And you know what some people say is actually now, they always say, oh, modern medicine has made it so we live longer. We're not living longer. You will appreciate this, Jeremy. We're dying longer, right? We're dying longer. We're just prolongating the situation. And you might have already answered my last question now, John, but I'll pose it to Jeremy first and then you can tag on. I always ask, if the listener could just do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do? Jeremy, let's start with you.
Get your outside, and I mean it. Get your rubber sole shoes and throw them in the bin, or get them earthed and get leather sole shoes so that you're earthing and getting the natural light as much as possible, particularly the morning, midday, and afternoon. So you're getting the right light signals. And then at night, and I know it is one thing, or it seems it's more, but at night, start turning the lights off and go back to candles or red light bulbs or orange light bulbs without any blue light, so that you release your melatonin, which makes you sleep, but it also makes you repair and detox at night while you're sleeping, is only released in the absence of blue light. If you've got any of your posh, nice LED lights on, or your blue screen on your TV or your smartphone, it won't release for 2 hours. You're not going to sleep. You're not going to detox. You're not going to repair. You're going to age, and you're going to continue getting sicker and sicker. So get your outside.
Wow. Excellent. Excellent advice. You're speaking my love language. I love the light hygiene. I think it's an overlooked aspect of well-being. What about you, John?
I'm going to tend to my answer to Jeremy's. On top of getting outside and taking your light seriously, water. People need to take their water. If water isn't your number one priority in life, something's off, because we are mostly water. We are water beings. And the water and the light have a symbiotic relationship together. And there are so many people who have never actually drank natural living water. They're drinking tap water, or at best, well, I say at worst, bottled water. You need to get natural water. And I'm a huge, probably one of the best things that I did for myself well over a decade ago was I haven't had a drop of water on me or in me that hasn't been distilled, because we live in a distillation. Earth is a distillation unit. And so water in its natural state is distilled. And that's the only way you can get all of the man-made crap, all the pharmaceuticals, all the residues out of water, is to distill it. So when you distill water, you get it down to being just water. And there's people who do wonderful things with water. They move it around, they energize it many different ways. You can get deep into all of that. But if you are just drinking clean distilled water instead of what's coming out of your tap, which is absolute garbage, I don't care where you live. I don't care what filter system you have. Your filtering system isn't taking hydrofluoric silicic acid out, and that's it can't be taken out by any other way other than distilling it. So take your water very, very seriously. And while you're taking your water seriously, heed Jeremy's advice and take your light very, very seriously. Those two things will literally change your life.
powerful words to end on. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I'm so grateful.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Our guests today were John Gusty and Dr. Jeremy Ayres. You can visit their websites, theredpillrevolution.com and jeremyayres.com to learn more. And or check out naturallybetterforyou, that's the number 4.com. And I am Hilda Labrada Gore, the host and producer of this podcast on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for today's episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now for a recent podcast review from Apple Podcasts. It was entitled, Easily Digestible Calls to Action. I've been listening to this podcast for almost 1.5 years now, and it has been incredibly transformative for my life and my family's well-being. I was a sleep-deprived mom of a 4-month-old when I first discovered this podcast. And my favorite parts are the answers to the questions posed at the end of every episode. Hearing multiple people suggest the same changes really has helped me make better choices in small, manageable chunks in a very overwhelming time of my life. Now I make bone broth, bake sourdough, ferment sauerkraut, and take my daughter outside for long chunks of time. And none of it feels overwhelming because every step built on the last one. And I don't have any food addictions anymore, like smart foods, white cheddar popcorn, Oreos, fast food, etc. It's crazy how that happens when you eat real, satisfying food. I am so thankful for the wisdom shared here and the impact it's made in my life. KCKHCC93, thank you so much for that review. It is amazing to me that you have taken to heart the answers to the questions. This is so beautiful. And this is one reason we end every episode like that, because we want you to have an action step you can make your own and to break out of the matrix and to take your health into your own hands. This is fabulous. Thank you so much for that review. You too can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Just go to Apple Podcasts, click on ratings and reviews, give us a bunch of stars, and tell us how this show has made a difference in your life. And thank you so much for listening, my friend. Stay well. And remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.